Hi, yeah, welcome to today's tutorial. So in today's tutorial, I'd like to show you how to achieve a clean finish in a lined garment. So for this garment, this is for my 7-year-old. So the sleeve is gathered at the bottom and the sleeve edge. So it was necessary for me to um, put together the sleeve first before attaching it to the main fabric here. So this is it attached to the main fabric, and now I want to put in the lining. So I've sewn the lining to the main fabric at the neckline and also under stitched this. So I've done it for one sleeve, so I'm about to work on the second sleeve. So in order to do this, I'll reach into the inside of the garment that has the wrong side of both the main fabric and the lining fabric. So I'm going to match the underarm point, which is the side seam of both the main fabric and the lining fabric. So making sure that the right side here, which is the inside, the lining of the sleeve, I'll match it to the right side of the lining fabric at the side seam. So this is a bit tricky, so I'm going to take this way and line up the side seam at the underarm point with the side seam on the lining. So I'll pin this and pass the pin at the seam stitch line of both the main fabric and the underarm points, which means my sleeve is sandwiched in between both of them. So I'll pin this through, making sure that I'm matching the seam line. So if you notice, when I attached the sleeve, I didn't trim the seam allowance of my main fabric, so it makes it easier to match the seam line. So I'll keep matching the fabric. Remember, I started at the underarm point, so it's easier to start here. So you have to start here, and then I'll keep taking this, ensuring that I'm matching the right side of my lining to the lining of the sleeve. Remember, the sleeve is sandwiched in between the main fabric and the lining fabric. So if you look at this, the wrong side of my lining fabric is up here and the wrong side of my main fabric is up. So once you're able to maintain that, you are fine. So as I get into the shoulder seam, it's going to get a bit tricky. So this is the shoulder seam. I hope you can see this of the garment. So I'm going to try to pull out as much as I can past the shoulder seam line for the lining fabric, and then you can see it's going to twist here. It's going to get a bit tricky here, but still maintaining this. Still continue pinning this. So you need to use a lot of pins to achieve this. It makes it easier to just pin as you go. So I'm still matching the seam line. I'm matching the fabric edge. It has to be the same. Then now at the shoulder seam here, you can see what I'm doing. I'm pulling the other side of the sleeve out, because I need to match the shoulder seam without catching the other side of the sleeve. So you take this to the side. This is the shoulder seam for the lining, and this is the shoulder seam for the main fabric. So I'm going to match this as well. Pass your pin. You pass the pin through, ensuring that you are hitting the stitch line. That's the seam line. Okay, try to be as accurate as possible, and then this is done. So you check to see that the sleeve, any part of the sleeve or the armhole for the lining and the main fabric are not cut in what you have just pinned. So you can see this is free. So I'll do this. I'm just going to attach one more pin. I can't do this round because of the shoulder seam. So this is just to keep it in place, and then I'll adjust this side to ensure that I have equal, to ensure that my fabric edges are equal. So you just adjust here. That's what I pinned earlier on. So you adjust your fabric, the lining. Okay, then we need to check this, the fabric edges are matching. So basically what I've done is to pin from the underarm point, that's like the armpit of one side, from one side to the shoulder seam here, just a little past the shoulder seam. So I'm going to sew this part first before I move to the other side of the armhole. So it's best to do this in sections so that you don't, make a mistake. So you try to pull this one out again from this hole here. Okay, just so that your fabric can be lay flat. Okay, so I'll start sewing from here. That's past the shoulder seam. This is the shoulder seam of my lining, the shoulder seam of my main fabric here. So I'll start sewing from here, and then I'll take it all the way to the underarm point here. So this is a bit tricky because the armhole is quite small, as his children's were. So put this down like this, and then I'm sewing at half an inch sewing allowance here. So you can choose to sew from the main fabric side or the lining fabric, but I find that it's easier for me to do this. So put in your pin, try and put in your needle, and then I'm basically moving slowly because I have gathered, my sleeve head is gathered, so it's making it a bit, difficult for my needle to pass through. So as you are sewing, you ensure that there are no folds unless you are working with a gathered head, sleeve head, and then you adjust as you go along. And then, okay, let's inspect this. So this is fine. So let's inspect what we have done. So we have sewn from the shoulder seam to the underarm point on one side here. So you turn this to the right side of the lining, so we can see this is what we have here. So this has been stitched, this part is still open. So I'll go back to the inside of the garment and now pin the rest of it. So I'm going to pull this out of the shoulder seam. As you can see, I'm pulling this, my seam allowance. I'm going to pull it through. So this is the shoulder seam here. This is my shoulder seam here, and this is the shoulder seam for my lining. So you can see I've stitched up to this point, and then I'm going to pin it. So we'll pin this way, again matching the fabric edges. Remember, the armhole for your lining fabric and the main fabric, they are the same because you cut them from they are cut from the same pattern. so it should match, as long as you have not trimmed the seam allowance after attaching the sleeve. So we have this. Okay, so this is perfect. Okay, and we're back to the armhole seam. So I still have my pin at the, sorry, the underarm point here. So you can put in more pins just to secure everything. You can use as many pins as you like to keep everything in place. Then inspect this, look at this. This is fine. So I'm going to start from where I stopped. Starting from here, this is where I stopped here. So keep sewing this. So you have to ensure that there are no folds in your lining and your main fabric. Okay, then can go as fast or as slow as you like. Remember to remove your pin as you sew along so as not to damage your needle. Move in small sections. It's a bit tricky, or you get it. Just move in small sections. As you can see, I'm pulling this out from the shoulder seam here. So because this is for a child, that shoulder seam is a bit tight, but it's the same technique if you are sewing for an adult. So I'm trying to keep this as flat, as smooth and as flat as possible. Make sure there's no fold down. So my shoulder seam here, which is where I stopped, we're very close. Again, we go under the fabric to ensure there's no fold, and then we finish this up. So I just like to go over the starting points just to secure that area. So you can choose to, you can also backstitch, and then we are done. So before I trim, I'm going to trim. So I just pull out this, the right side of my lining, to ensure that there are no issues on this side. So remember, my sleeve is gathered. Yeah, so you'd expect to see these folds because I'm working with a gathered sleeve, but the fabric itself, there are no puckers along the back and the side. So we'll see this. So this is perfect. Can we see this? This is attached neatly. So go through it, go around, check that there are no issues. So any part that has an issue, just go back to that section, loosen it, loosen your stitch loosen your stitches and then go over it again, but I think we are good to go. So the next thing to do, if you see, you notice, I don't know if you can notice, it still has a bit of tension because of the sewing allowance inside. So now I'm going to trim the sewing allowance. So I'm going to be doing this in sections as well. And once we are doing this, you have to be very careful that you don't cut either your lining fabric or your main fabric. So you have to ensure that you can see your stitch line on both the main fabric and the lining fabric. And I also like to touch it. Once I know I can touch it, I can feel it before I start with my scissors. So I'm going to cut as close to, remember you should be able to touch your stitch line on both the main fabric and the lining fabric. If something is, if you have a fold, once you feel that you can't touch your stitch line, please just check what you are doing and ensure that you're able to touch the stitch line here and here. So that will prevent you from cutting into your fabric. So like I said, do this in small sections so you don't make a mistake. So I'm still feeling for my stitch line on both sides, and you trim as close to the same line as possible. So put this down. It's tighter at the shoulder seam, so we need to be careful there. So bring this out as much as you pull it from the shoulder. It's tight, but it's doable. And then stitch line again, and then the stitch line on this side. So trim this off, trim this off sections as close as you can get. Okay, so I have done this. I'm going to hold on to, move round to the underarm. This is the underarm point, that's the armpit area. And then the same thing, make sure there are no folds. Keep your fabric, the section you want to trim, keep it straight. I have this side as well. Put that down, and then pull the rest of the armhole from the shoulder seam. I want to pull it, yeah, so I can access. Okay, okay, so yeah, this is why I stopped. So I'm going to continue here. That's the shoulder seam here, you can see this is our shoulder seam. So I'll continue trimming. Just check that there are no folds. Checking. Go as close as you can. And then I'm going to snip this, like, okay, just this. Okay, just to make it easier for it to turn. You have to be careful here, just short. Okay, so shake this out, shake this out, shake this out. Okay, so this is the sleeve we just completed. Then turn this to the right side. That's the sleeve is on the right side now. So no issues on this side. And then the inside is smooth. This is smooth. So all you have to do is to give the armhole a very good press to set the seam, and then you are good to go.